Hey, folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the great human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. Listen, today we have some friends of ours that are returning to the show, Doctors Bill and Kristi Gaultiere. They're the founders of Soul Shepherding, a ministry helping pastors and leaders go deeper with Jesus in emotional health and loving leadership, which is something we desperately need. So we're grateful for their work. Their new book, Deeply Loved, Receiving and Reflecting God's Great Empathy for You, explores how real spiritual transformation begins when we allow ourselves to be fully seen and loved by God. So we get deep into empathy from God and how that empowers us to give empathy to others. Bill is a 1, Kristi is a 2. We get into how this works itself out in each Enneagram type as well at one point in the interview. Really good stuff. Glad you're here. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now here's the man of the hour, Ian Cron.
Hey everybody, it's a big day here in the Typology studio. We're welcoming back our good friends Bill and Kristi Gaultiere, who are spiritual directors and therapists, psychologists, just exemplars of great psychology. Welcome back to the show, you guys.
Hey, thank you, Ian. We're so blessed to connect with all your Typology listeners.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you back. I want to ask you just to come out of the gate with a hot question. Why don't people love, like, or appreciate themselves?
Well, they're lacking what we write about as self-empathy, which we talk about as agreeing with love and grace from God and others. And so when we're self-critical, when we're not self-aware, it inhibits all of our relationships and all of our life.
We all have empathy deficits, ways that we were not understood, accepted, loved. There weren't people that really took time to get to know us, to seek us out, to understand, and to attune to us. And so we treat ourselves the same way. We get all kinds of emotional barriers that hold us back from flourishing.
Right. The reason I asked this question is I remember one time a therapist asked me, Ian, are you your own best friend? And I was like, what? Because no one had ever asked that question. Ian, are you your own best friend? And I had to say, no, I'm not. If I had a friend who treated me the way that I treated me, they would no longer be my friend, right? And it has, if any of us could write the book with a definitive answer to the question, why don't people naturally love, like, and appreciate themselves? Like, you'd make $1 zillion, right? Because people have circled the question. Right, we can circle the question, but really answering the question, what is the central source of blockage in a person's life that prevents them from not only experiencing human love, but even divine love? Let's dig deeper down for me into that question.
Yeah, I think we're talking about shame, and we're talking about especially unconscious shame.
Ooh, tell me the difference between conscious and unconscious shame.
Well, and when it's unconscious, you maybe feel bad, but you're not thinking about it. You don't really have words for the emotions that are in there, and learning the language of emotions and the different nuances of our emotions is a really big deal, because I can't like myself or receive care from anybody if I don't know myself. I'm not aware of myself. But we tend to want to do this sort of like by myself, but we're created as relational beings. We need each other. And so we really get to know ourselves through the eyes and ears of another person.
Let me illustrate with a story, Ian. So
Great.
I'm thinking about a number of years ago, my grandmother died. I had teenage kids. I was stressed about some things with our ministry that we were leading. And we were on our way somewhere in the car, just Bill and I alone. And I began to share some of the feelings of overwhelm I was having. And Bill was giving me great listening. He was listening to me. He was tuning to my emotions. He was really looking at me with love. And he stopped me and he said, Kristi, it doesn't seem like you're able to receive my empathy and my love right now for you. It seems like there's something going on inside of you that's blocking it, or you're not agreeing with it, or you're sabotaging it. And he was absolutely right. Inside, I was feeling so much shame for having emotions, for having needs. Inside, my self-talk was, come on, Kristi, pull it together, snap out of these emotions, which is what my parents told me to do when I was a kid. They'd, send me to my room, isolate me when I had emotions because it overwhelmed them. They didn't know what to do with them. And I experienced it as abandonment. And so I was treating myself the way I had been treated. And the way that Bill was treating me, with loving me, seeking to understand me, giving me empathy and grace, inside I was resisting it. It was like there was this part of me that was desperate for it, but there was this other part of me resisting. One foot on the gas, one foot on the brake.
Did you say,
Yes.
ooh, I'm not giving myself empathy, or did you say you're crazy at the time?
Well, when he pointed it out to me, I actually stopped and I said, thank you. I wasn't even conscious of the shame I felt right now. And I do need and want to receive your love and empathy and grace. So it actually was really helpful to me. And then it was a breakthrough for me because I would catch myself starting to do it. It was a new awareness of what was unconsciously operating in my soul.
Wow.
Hmm.
What did that look like to you, Bill? When you, how did you tap into the fact that she was subconsciously resisting your empathy?
I could see it in her face, that just the kind of downcast, and I could see the distress in her, and that because when someone receives empathy, their face will brighten a little bit. And in fact, there's been research done on this, in that when we're hurting or struggling and we talk to somebody, if we don't receive empathy, the shame centers of our brain light up. That's how powerful empathy is. But I think we tend to want, back to your question, Ian, we tend to want to do it like as a self-help job, but it's always relational. I mean, this happened to me last night. I mean, we wrote the book, we teach this, but I still struggle with it, right? And so we've had some stress yesterday, and I had some frustration, and Kristi was giving me kindness, and she was gentle with me, and she was wanting to understand how I felt. And so it took me a little while to warm up to that and join her and agree with that, but I was able to do it. Henry Nouwen talks about befriending our emotions. And that's one of the ways that we talk about empathy in our book, Deeply Loved, is just the importance of being kind to our emotions. But I do that with somebody else who's kind to my emotions. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, but also as we're talking about the unconscious piece that you asked, Anthony, last night, Bill, I was charmed by my personality, and I became aware later, after the fact, that I was actually seeking your appreciation because I was feeling insecure. And I asked you for empathy, but the reality is I was wanting appreciation also. And thankfully, your empathy was what I really needed when you gave me that. I didn't need the appreciation anymore. But I was unconsciously, as an Enneagram 2, seeking appreciation. What had started us off was we were talking about something we did in leading our ministry together, and Bill was sharing his feedback in some ways that I felt unappreciated.
Enneagram 1 here, everything can be improved.
Everything can be improved. Yeah, you were trying to improve, and I wasn't feeling appreciated. So it's a perfect storm between us, and I wasn't conscious that I was needing the appreciation, but your empathy took care of it for me, thankfully. And then it was today I woke up and I realized, actually, it was that need for appreciation that was motivating me.
Interesting.
So that we're all on the same page, because there's a lot of different writing about empathy. And I'm thinking about Kristen Neff right now and others who write so beautifully about empathy. What's your definition of empathy?
We define empathy as seeking to understand what someone is thinking, feeling, or experiencing in order to help them know that they are deeply loved by God.
Right, which of course is the title of the new book, Deeply Loved. Why I began with the question, why do people have so much trouble believing that they're worthy of love and relationship, right? Because frankly, I don't know anybody that can say to me that they might say to me, I have an intellectual awareness of God's love or the love of others, but my capacity to experience it is very small. I'm not very good at enjoying it. It's like someone is setting out a meal for me every day of love, and I just can't eat it. I can't ingest it. And I'm always like, what is the central block? that prevents it. Now, you say shame. We could talk about internalizing messages from our childhood that counter or deflect that love, right? But whatever it is, it takes a long time. In my experience, right? It takes a long time to believe that you are deeply loved. I think that's the project of a lifetime, not a year of therapy. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a journey. I think if we didn't have sort of a gnawing hunger, even a desperation inside of us, I mean, what would our life be like? You know, we're human beings with needs and deep desires and longings, and those cause us to seek more meaningful relationships and opportunities of offering our gifts to others to help other people, and so much of life is in that, in the human condition.
Yeah. So you're an Enneagram 1. Ones typically have obviously that stream of negative self-commentary that runs, right? Never enough, never enough. It has to be better. I have to improve, et cetera, which seems to me to be a difficult tide to turn back. How have you learned that you're deeply loved as an Enneagram 1?
You know, what helps me the most is what we're talking about, and that's being in a safe relationship where I can be vulnerable and authentic and name what's underneath all that striving that's in me, all that stress to do it right and to be more perfect. But when I can be emotionally honest, starting with maybe I'm stressed or frustrated, but getting down to, deeper longings to be known and to be accepted. And when I receive empathy, we say empathy is oxygen for your soul. And I've experienced that. And I'm super thankful for Kristi, for friends, for spiritual director, people that I talk with who give me empathy. And for me, that's like a core, not only soul care practice, but spiritual discipline, because it helps me connect with God's love.
Mm-hmm. Well, how about for you, Kristi, as an Enneagram 2, what kinds of, messages or internalized patterns that you have that tend to prevent you from experiencing the love of God in others?
Yeah, well, it's that lie that I'm not wanted. And when I give into that lie, what do? I hide, or I try other strategies of trying to help in order to seek the substitute of being appreciated or needed. And those never satisfy my need for being deeply loved. When I feel deeply loved, when I feel wanted, it's when somebody actually does seek to understand me, to know me, to attune to my emotions, to understand my thoughts, my experiences. And when they are with me in that, I feel incredibly loved and wanted and safe. And then I am able to receive and participate with God's love in their life as well as mine. We hear, we love because God first loved us. And that is definitely true for me. As I feel God's love mediated through another person, then I'm filled up to the full to be able to love as well.
And we also empathize because God first empathized with us, because empathy is a component of love.
Right. So how does this overlap with Kurt Thompson's work in interpersonal neurobiology?
Well, I mean, we have mirror neurons, and as Kurt says, we're all looking for a face that's looking for us. We all have this need for this deeper connection to be truly known and understood, and other people have that need from us. And a lot of us are helpers of other people, whether counselors, coaches, spiritual directors, or just within our relationships and our family and our friends, our work, our church. But we don't realize is that to be truly effective in caring for others, it has to come from the inside. And that's the point of we love and we empathize because God first empathized with us. It's got to get on the inside. And that has to happen not only spiritually through prayer and so forth, but also in our human relationships. That's the basic fabric of life, and that's where God most often shows up.
Yeah, and also, Ian, we are wired for empathy. I mean, you look at a baby. When a baby is born, if I'm going to love them, if I'm going to care for them, I'm going to be attuned to their cry. I'm going to be curious. I'm going to need to have empathy in order to foster this care attachment. What does that cry mean? Is that a hungry cry? Is that a I'm hurt? Is that a pain cry? Is that a boredom cry? What, like, as parents, we are attuning to our child's bodies, their cries, their needs, to try to figure out what kind of love response do they need from me? How can I will good for them? How can I care for them? Do they just need attention? What is it that the baby is needing from me? That's empathy, is we're attuning to them and discerning what their needs are.
Do you think that certain Enneagram types are more disposed or more equipped with empathy than other types?
Well, I would say that for me as a one, I was not naturally equipped with emotional awareness and the language of feelings and empathy for others. I had to learn it. And Kristi, for you, it was much more natural.
Yeah, it was natural. And I do think it is more natural for some of us. Some of us are more our Enneagram type. We've actually even learned it in a performative way. Sometimes some of us use it performatively. Some of us use it for connection. And others of us don't, really understand the value and the power and the grace of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that we all have a different levels. Some of us use empathy to the point of codependency in really unhealthy ways. Some of us avoid it because it drains us, because we don't understand how to use it in a healthy way and have healthy boundaries for our soul.
2s and 4s and 9s seem to be more like oriented around empathy, but are they really healthy with that versus it being performative or pleasing, or like with the 9s, just, merging and absorbing. And so learning to be healthy with our empathy so that it's sustainable and it's truly caring for the other person, it's got to come from a deep inner place where we have some sense of being loved. We've received empathy, compassion, grace, truth that was meaningful for us. And so there's something solid inside in terms of a sense of self we talk about psychologically. So from that place, it's from that place that I'm able to listen, I'm able to understand, I'm able to care. And it's with a spirit of generosity. I'm not trying to get something or put out an ego self. And all of our Enneagram types are based on this false self, ego self, defensive structure. It's not coming from a place of authenticity, except as we learn to grow in self-awareness and in our relational connections.
Yeah, I think this is really important, right? Because, there's actually a term, which is tactical empathy. Or we might call it strategic empathy, right? Where in psychology, we know, for example, there's a guy, Chris Voss, he's a FBI hostage negotiator, and he talks about tactical empathy. And the idea is that when you're negotiating with a hostage taker, that the number one thing they need is empathy. Now, you don't have to agree with them. Empathy doesn't mean I agree with the reasons you have taken these people hostage, right? It's just like, wow, it sounds like you're under a lot of pressure. You know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of stuff he talks about, but it's tactical empathy, right? I think the kind of empathy you're talking about, and by the way, a 3 might do that in a business deal, right? Like, I will be tactically empathic in order to get the outcome that I want. And that's not actually empathy. That's a kind of manipulation, right? What you're talking about is empathy that is rooted in love, which we might define as willing the good of the other.
There you go.
Willing the good of the other. And, I think a lot of times as we begin to do Enneagram work, we have to go through a season where we're like just checking our motives a little bit. This sounds like empathy, but is it really empathy, or am I just trying to get appreciation like a 2 might do? I'm going to be empathic so this person appreciates me, or I'm going to be empathic because that's what good people do. An Enneagram one might say, or whatever the case may be, and just beginning to self-observe and check motives at the door.
Yeah, our self-awareness is just so important to all things healthy, loving relationships and spiritual growth. It's absolutely critical, and that's what we love about the Enneagram, is it helps what's been unconscious in us to become more conscious. And what we're saying in Deeply Loved is at the core of that, at the heart of all this, is this fundamental need that we all have to be known and truly loved. And we want to give that. Our best life, our best fulfillment is when we're able to give that to other people. And so there needs to be a mutuality and a reciprocalness ultimately. But sometimes, your thing about tactical empathy is really helpful. Another way of talking about this is most people would think that a book on empathy is going to be about the listening skill. Oh, yeah, I know I need to use these skills to be more empathetic. And of course, in Deeply Loved, we talk about that. But that's not the heart of the book. Because what I've learned over the years, I've trained over 1,000 lay counselors in empathy, now spiritual directors in soul shepherding. We have 150 spiritual directors in our certificate in spiritual direction program right now. And a core thing that we train them in is empathy. But what we've learned over many years of not only practicing empathy, but teaching it to others is that if it's not on the inside, if I haven't learned to receive it through my own journey of vulnerability and authenticity about my brokenness, about my sin, about my pain, if I haven't learned to be vulnerable with that and receive understanding and care through fighting my own defense mechanisms, my own shame and so forth, my ability to give it's going to tend to be tactical or robotic or using the skills. And when I was early as a psychologist, that's what I was doing. And little by little, I learned, no, I need to receive this. And so I became a client in therapy early on. And that really helped me with the heart of empathy, the presence of it, the authenticity of really being there for somebody. And I noticed a huge difference in my clients and how they were responding to the therapy when I was coming from that place.
Well, and your wife.
And my wife.
I mean, we had some conflicts. I can remember you giving me great advice. You're so wise. And I didn't care. And I felt insulted by his advice because, that old adage, I don't care what you know if I don't know that you care. So I needed to know he cared. And I needed to know he understood what I was experiencing. And only then was I interested in what he knew. And this is something that, you had to learn to first start with the care and the understanding. And with the Enneagram, this is where sometimes we can make a mistake. We can get so excited about the information and the knowledge and the wisdom and the truth that the Enneagram unpacks for us. But if we're pushing that on somebody without first listening to them and caring for them and helping them to feel loved and understood and known, it can be very injurious and very unsafe for us. Mm-hmm. So especially with something with powerful truth, this is where empathy can be God's grace paired with truth, which is so powerful and such a gift for us.
Go ahead, Ian.
I was just going to say, Bill, you mentioned earlier that each Enneagram type has a characteristic way of missing on empathy, right? Can you just walk us through that a little bit so our folks can get a handle on where they are maybe on the whole topic of empathy?
Yeah. So just as a opening thematic statement for each type. So ones feel inadequate and are seeking to be right. They're seeking perfection. They're not seeking to be truly known and to receive empathy. That's not their focus.
And then, like we talked about, twos, we tend to feel unwanted. And so instead of seeking the empathy that we need and the love that we need, we tend to seek that false substitute of appreciation.
Threes feel unsuccessful or like they're not, performing enough. And so then they're seeking achievement. They're not seeking empathy.
And then fours, they might feel ordinary and they're seeking that feeling of specialness instead of the empathy that they need for who they are authentically.
Fives, of course, it's about, feeling alone and seeking knowledge, seeking resources, might be money, but they're not, this is like their replacement for empathy. They're not realizing they're doing that.
I mean, of course, we know the sixes, they're feeling fear. They're really seeking that safety in situations where what they really need is empathy for the fear that they're feeling.
Sevens, of course, feel bored. Then they're seeking pleasure, stimulation, variety, something new, spontaneity, and instead of empathy.
I mean, of course, the eights, they feel vulnerable or fear of vulnerability and weakness. And so they're powering up to try to defend themselves where they really need some empathy for that sense of vulnerability they feel.
Now, nines, as we said, often are good at empathy, at least in the outward sense of it. But personally, they're feeling lethargic and they're seeking to merge with people through how they listen, how they orient around them, even offering empathy. But seeking empathy is really hard for nines, and to be vulnerable, to let the spotlight be on them, to be focused on them. So we've seen nines flourish when they learn to receive empathy.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were going through that list, and I thought about this earlier today, that the strategies of each of the 9 Enneagram types for winning love and security, esteem, approval, a sense of mastery and control, every Enneagram type's shtick, if you will,
Yeah.
is absolutely exhausting. It's exhausting. And it siphons off the energy of love and diminishes it, the capacity to love or receive love, right? And so I'm thank you for going through the 9 types. Now, because you guys are training spiritual directors, and lots of spiritual directors, like the rest of us, right? They have solid intellectual grounding and understanding of God's love, God's empathy, the importance of empathy, but actually experiencing it at the level of the heart, right? Where you feel like you're just grounded and safe in the love of God. How do we, it's that old question, and it's almost like my first question, so bear with me. Moving from the head to the heart, how do we find an experience of love? Because, I've met plenty of people who quote unquote understand God, but I've met very few people who truly experience God. I mean, or that number is far less.
Well, part of the challenge of that is our experience of God ebbs and flows. And so we talk about, consolation, where you're sensing and feeling God's presence, and desolation, where you're not. And so we have these back and forth rhythms. But so it's difficult to peel back the layers of the onion. We need to be motivated around an intelligent and vigorous, enduring search for self-awareness, because knowing self, knowing God, knowing others, all three are connected. We talk about 3-way empathy in our book, Deeply Loved. Every human being needs empathy from God, another person, and then their own self. Their own self is the agreeing with it, the appreciation, the thankfulness, the trust, the faith in God, and then also in God's love through other people. So we all need that, but when we have these unconscious resistances, if we're not aware of them, it's going to greatly limit us. Once we're aware of them, we can begin to participate better in this journey of growing in deeper love relationships.
Yeah, it's so interesting what you're saying, because honestly, you're kind of getting at something that I believe, which is, I think people have an expectation that they should, quote unquote, have a warm, positive, affective experience of God's love all the time, and if they don't, they're failing, right? When in reality, you were just referencing something from Ignatian spirituality, right? Like there are seasons when God's absence is real.
Yeah.
Right? When when periods of desolation, as we're moving into the mystical tradition, that God's absence is a form of presence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes people just think that it should never have to be this emotion. My relationship with God should not be this emotionally complicated. It should always feel good. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't see that anywhere. Like, that's just not reality.
No, it's not. In fact, we did a Bible study where we looked at the life of Jesus in the Gospels, and we identified 39 emotions that Jesus experienced. Jesus understands our emotions. Look at the empathy God has for us in the incarnation, God himself becoming human to experience everything we experience as humans, to experience every temptation and trial. That helps me connect with God in my times of desolation. I'm going through one right now. My brother-in-law died less than 2 weeks ago from pancreatic cancer, the third immediate family member I've lost in the last 3 years to cancer. And my other sister had a traumatic brain injury. And so I have two sisters going through incredibly difficult times right now. My other sister has a mentally ill daughter and is a recent widow. So there's a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And there are times, honestly, when I'm like, God, I don't know. I don't see your goodness in this. I don't know where your redemption is working in this right now, in these circumstances. I'm grieving. I'm sad. But I know that Jesus felt that same sorrow and grief. He experienced the loss of his earthly father, Joseph. He experienced the loss of his cousin and partner in ministry, John the Baptist. He experienced the death of Lazarus, his close friend. He lived in a time under Roman occupation where he was seeing brutal deaths and tragedies and horrible things happening. And God in his heart, he weeps for his people. I mean, Jeremiah tells us that. There's all kinds of scriptures around this. When I connect to Jesus's co-suffering, it helps me to feel loved. It helps me to feel known. It helps me to know that this isn't all just meaningless and I'm not just abandoned in it all.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm going to play cynic for a second. I'm I'm a spiritual directee. I'm sitting with you in a room and I say, well, listen, if God has experienced the suffering that I'm experiencing right now, and he knows how crappy it feels, and he's all powerful, why doesn't he just take it away? Would not be the most loving thing to do? How do you respond to that? Because I know people are listening right now thinking that. Like we've heard God suffers with us. It's like, what's the point? If you're that powerful, why not simply remove it?
I want to move closer and validate the experience in the question and say, well, tell me more about what you'd like God to take away, what you're suffering with right now.
Okay.
In other words, I want to offer empathy, from my heart. I want to feel what you feel. I want to get closer to this.
Okay.
I don't want to offer like a
Kristi?
theological defense or a bunch of Bible verses or something. I want to be with you where you are in the cynicism, in the pain, in the distrust for God, and the maybe anger at God.
Ian, I experienced this myself when I was at a wall. I was at a time of deconstruction, doubting in my faith. Bill and I have been so blessed to be mentored by Dallas Willard and his wife Jane. And I was in this time at this wall and really struggling, also out of compassion fatigue from my work as a therapist and a pastor. And Dallas's teachings are profound. I'd read all his book, listen to him on CD thousands of times on repeat, just over and over and over, spent time with them. But I approached Dallas the same exact way you just modeled in our conversation, in the empathy and the love of God that came from him to me in my questions, in my doubts, in my pain, was so helpful that it was enough for me to say, okay, if you trust and believe and know God to be that good and that loving, I'm going to continue to too. And it was so helpful to me. And it was the same with Jane. When I went to her and, I was defended against going back into my abandonment wound from an early surgery. I had to save my life as a newborn. And she was like, nope, you need to go back into that. Need more of God's love and grace touch there in that injury, Kristi. I was like, nope, I've done the therapy on it. Like, I didn't want to open all that up again. And it was her empathy and her love that gave me the courage to go back to that and to receive much deeper healing. But I wouldn't have had the courage to do it if it wasn't for the amount of empathy that she had for me, and even how hard and how much courage it took me to be willing to go back to that wound and feel that pain again.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's I think that's really, really helpful. So I think that probably in my lifetime, I'm 65, and I'm thinking over the course of my lifetime, we've never lived culturally at a moment when there's less empathy than we have now. And I mean, really, we are in an empathy crisis in terms of what we see on social media, what we see in the news, what we see. I mean, the language of is so coarse and so cruel and so lacking empathy. That I, first of all, am excited that there are people out there teaching empathy, because obviously, we're in a major shortfall. I mean, just a major shortfall. What's the answer culturally? Like, what practices are you teaching people to avoid being in environments where empathy is actually now derided, even among Christians? It is derided as weakness, right? Like we've had, people will say, oh, empathy is just being woke. I've heard it. I've heard this from people. And it's very aggressive. There's a lot of unhealthy energy out there. How do we get people to awaken to empathy as a core Christian virtue?
The people who say things like this, who are against empathy, are usually the people who need it the most, but are defended against it. And intellectually, what they're talking about and what they're against is not really true empathy. It's fragilizing, rescuing, codependency, coddling people.
Tolerance, agreement, manipulation, using it tactically, like you said.
It's a distortion of empathy that's not connected to truth and to responsibility. So in Deeply Loved, we give a formula in quotes here, for growth. Empathy plus truth plus responsibility equals growth. Empathy is not really going to help me if it's not connected to me knowing the truth about myself, my life, God, other people. But sometimes we get confused, especially because in our culture, we use the word feel to refer to emotions, but also perceptions of other people. The two are very different. And that's one of the misunderstandings of empathy is like, you're always agreeing with people. You just always have to be nice. You could never speak the truth in love or have a boundary. You just have to do whatever people want. And that's not true empathy. And so with true empathy, I'm learning things about myself and about other people. And if I have perceptions of the world out there or of God that are not accurate, and somebody's giving me empathy, a good empathizer is going to differentiate between those perceptions and the emotions that are about me. So as a listener, I want to understand, validate the emotions, because that's my personal subjective reality, and I get to be the authority on that. That's how God's created us. But my opinions and my perceptions, those are up for discussion, and those might be off. So we don't when we're giving empathy, we don't necessarily agree with that. We need to explore that. And then when empathy is really life-changing, it's going to help me take responsibility for my life. It's not going to coddle me. It's going to activate me to do what is good and what is right, what's going to be helpful and loving for me and for other people and for God.
So one of the things we write in Deeply Loved is that truth without empathy is really harsh. But empathy without truth is inaccurate. And then responsibility without empathy just becomes drudgery. But empathy without responsibility coddles, fragilizes people.
I love that word, fragilizes. I was going to use the word infantilizes. And I think that's that, we turn people into infants, right? So, it's so interesting, in my 12-step experience, I think that's the magic sauce. Like when you go to 12-step groups, empathy is very real in those rooms, right? And because it is almost always twinned with the truth. People are not afraid to speak up what needs to be said in those spaces, right? But it is a place where at least in the actual meeting hour, people get to say whatever they want, and people listen very carefully, right? Now, you may have a conversation offline with someone who said something, right? That to go more in depth into what they were saying, but you're actually in the room not allowed to respond. All you can do is listen. My sponsor used to say, Ian, the beauty of meetings is you get to talk for 1 minute and listen for 59.
Yeah.
Right? You get 1 minute, dude, and then you got to listen for 59. And I do think there is a power because people in those rooms have experienced similar devastations. And also, interestingly enough, that's why those rooms are full of laughter. Like part of it is, oh yeah,
Been
oh
there.
yeah, I get it.
Understand.
You've
Yeah.
been there, and the laughter, And Kurt Thompson once said to me that the laughter that you hear in the rooms of recovery is proof that Addiction doesn't get the last word. Grace does.
Mm-hmm.
Now that obviously we know sad stories of how addictions can end, right? But the fact of the matter is that I think that that's what is happening in those rooms, right? Like empathy breeds a kind of, the Jesuits would say, a kind of hilarity, like a godly, joyful, gurgling kind of experience inside, which is really remarkable. Really,
well, that's why in the
remarkable.
fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, and so forth. But joy is in there, and it's connected to love, and a part of love is empathy.
Yeah, and empathy helps us to know we're not alone.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I do think that actually is one of the core messages of shame, which is I'm alone. That and nobody can reach me, right? That sense of alienation from God's self and others is just ever present in the shameful matrix. So,
yeah, and our Enneagram types are strategies and ways that we try to defend against that. And empathy breaks through, and empathy makes it safe for us to let go of our attachments to our personality, to our defense mechanism, and to open to receive.
I love that. Bill and Kristi, thank you so much for being on. Tell everybody about Deeply Loved and where they can get it.
Yeah, Deeply Loved, subtitle is Receiving and Reflecting God's Great Empathy for You. The book is available wherever books are sold. You can learn more on soulshepherding.org/deeplylovedbook. And at our Soul Shepherding website, you can also learn more about what we do as therapists and spiritual directors and coaches, and our team of spiritual directors. Especially, we'd invite you to come on retreat with us. We lead 8 retreats a year for 50 leaders, pastors, missionaries, spiritual directors, coaches, counselors, and it's a time of authenticity, very authentic community, giving and receiving empathy and growing emotionally and spiritually.
And at Soul Shepherding, we like to put together resources. We have Enneagram resources as well as Deeply Loved, but resources, care, and training to help you go deeper in your love for God, your experience of His love, and your emotional health and loving leadership.
Well, thank you guys. And like I said, in an age when empathy is, there's a paucity of it. We just don't have very much of it anymore. And where connection is so misunderstood. If your nose is in a screen all day, and if you're connecting with the world in that way, but not face to face, eyes to eye, heart to heart, then we're becoming less and less human.
Yeah, we call it the empathy desert.
Yes.
We call it the empathy desert. And we all are longing for the empathy that is the oxygen for our soul. It's how our soul breathes, is in genuine, authentic relationships of empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. Hard to communicate empathy in a text.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Not to its full effect anyway. All right, Anthony, I got empathy for you. Do you have empathy for me?
Yes, I do.
All right. Anthony and I went for a walk the other day and poured our guts in the park to each other about the things we're struggling with. And as you guys said, right, like I came away feeling so much more hopeful and so much more like, okay, we got this. It's going to be okay.
Awesome.
And Anthony, I'm deeply appreciative for that.
I feel the same for you, man.
And listen, everybody out there, you know how we end the show, but we mean this really from the deepest place in our souls. May you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, and may you have rest now and evermore. Until next time.